Now, to briefly return to an event in Durham on the 30th of April 2021. Indoor socialising was, as we know, at the time against the rules. Sir Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner and Durham MP Mary Foy, reportedly 30 other individuals as well, were filmed drinking in Durham after a day's campaigning. New evidence has emerged that the group had ordered a sizable curry. A delivery driver from an Indian restaurant in Durham yesterday claimed that he dropped off, quote, quite a big order for the Labour team. Curiously, when questioned by the Daily Mail later, the driver changed his story to say that he could not remember. There's something odd about the details of this event, of this party. First, the denials that Angela Rayner was there, only for the Labour Party to then admit that she was there only once video evidence was then presented. And now the changed story of the curry delivery driver. Sir Keir Starmer once claimed that this was brief stopping for food before returning to work. Yet we now know that the beer and curry footage was taken at 10:04 p.m. on Friday night. Mail on Sunday commentator Dan Hodges, someone who's been very critical of the Prime Minister over Partygate too, perhaps set out what likely happened most clearly. He wrote this morning that it's clear what happened. They campaigned. They then had a curry and beer. Then they all went home, which is fine, just as giving Boris the cake was fine, but both technically were a breach of the rules. So Labour are now tying themselves in knots. And that's the nub of it. If you're to take such a strict interpretation of the rules that banned indoor socialising in both June 2020 and April 2021, if you're to take such a strict approach as to deem Rishi Sunak as having broken the rules, who, let's remember, simply turned up at Downing Street for a work meeting and briefly sang Happy Birthday, well, then your interpretation of what the rules allow, gatherings deemed, quote, reasonably necessary for work purposes, then you're giving yourself no leeway there. Now people like me have argued for some time that, of course, reasonably necessary for work purposes could include cake, as other key workers enjoyed at various parts throughout this pandemic, as was reported at the time in the case of the Prime Minister as well, with no one minding. But if, as has now been the case, we're to say that even the Chancellor Rishi Sunak is deemed to have broken the rules, if we are really truly in this bizarre world where something that no reasonable person could have possibly thought to have been a transgression at the time has now become deemed as such, well, then the same rigid, uncompromising, inhuman, draconian interpretation must apply to all lawmakers. Else law has not been applied evenly across our country. Going for a curry after work, even with work colleagues, was technically against the rules. If you've given the Prime Minister and the Chancellor no leeway on their quote-unquote work gathering, if you've not considered in good faith how it was seen at the time, well, then you are nothing other than inconsistent if you fail to apply the same rules to the leader of the opposition. Starmer, of course, made that law too. He's a legislator, a lawyer. He voted for those rules. He pushed for harsher rules. And he pushed for the harshest possible interpretation of those rules in the case of the Prime Minister. So why on earth should he expect anything other than his own medicine in return?